Managing editor for the Weekly Standard, and Kyle Felcher, breaking news editor for the Washington Examiner, with us now. Thank you both for being here. I want to read to you something regarding Jared Kushner and his notable absence from the public eye, it seems, particularly from the West Wing. Here's what the New York Times is writing. They say in the first months of the administration, Mr. Kushner typically would spend 5 or 6 hours a day with the president in what his advocates described as playing defense, making sure others were not gaming the system by persuading Mr. Trump to make decisions without consulting others who had interest in the issues. Now, under a less free-willing system, Mr. Kushner and other aides are expected to stay in their own lanes. Kelly, is that, in a sense, the John Kelly effect? Is the role shrinking, really, for Kushner, or is it just becoming more focused?
It's a great question, Christy, and I think this is a case definitely of be careful what you wish for. Jared Kushner reportedly was one of the big forces behind getting Reince Priebus out as chief of staff. And now look what happened. That led to John Kelly coming in as chief of staff, and he has really curbed Jared Kushner's access during the day to Donald Trump, and it is quite a striking difference. And I sort of wonder, though, if the focus is there. We hear from that New York Times story as well that besides Middle East peace and bringing government to the modern era, he also is working on NAFTA and even on the reentry of American prisoners into society. I mean, this is a very wide-ranging portfolio, and you wonder how one person can handle all of this. And it's, John Kelly, I'm sure, is asking the same question. Yeah,
well, Kyle, reportedly the president privately, and this is according to a report, blames Kushner for Special Counsel Robert Mueller's widening probe. Now, we want to point out the president does deny that, but here's what the Washington Post is writing today. His still evolving role in the investigations of Russian election interference and possible obstruction of justice also make him a potential risk to President Trump, even as he enjoys the special status of being married to the boss's daughter, Ivanka, and serving as one of the president's senior confidants. So are we seeing the role of Jared Kushner evolve because of this investigation?
Sure. Well, there doesn't appear to be any direct evidence of that. No one at least is saying that on the record. We might actually think that it's better for Jared Kushner's mental health that his portfolio is reduced somewhat. But these constant questions about Jared Kushner's actions during the election, and the fact that the Senate Judiciary Committee is coming back for more documents, and this is not something that is unusual for Kushner. They've asked for more documents and more interviews and more emails before. It's a constant cloud kind of hanging over his presence in the White House, and it's something that us in the media are constantly asking questions about, and it's got to be hard for a White House with so much else to do. We talked about tax reform being a big issue this week, and yet here we are talking about Jared Kushner. So that's not good for any White House aide behind the scenes. You don't want to be that much of the focus. Right.
Kelly, Jan, I want to read another portion of this. But because it is interesting, from the New York Times, saying, according to 3 advisors to the president, Mr. Kelly has even discussed the possibility of Mr. Kushner and his wife Ivanka Trump departing the West Wing by the end of the year. Now, we want to be very clear here, and important to note, Chief of Staff Kelly does dispute this. But Kelly, Jane, how possible is it that Jared Kushner and Ivanka would leave Washington?
Yeah, Christy, my eyes kind of popped out of my head when I read that sentence myself, and I think it's quite remarkable that a story like the New York Times is even being published, and the one in the Washington Post, because they are talking to people anonymously, of course, but who are speaking out about the problems that Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump are bringing to the administration, and that was sort of unheard of a couple months ago. And this really shows one of the problems of nepotism. You bring in family members, it's very hard to get rid of them. Michael Flynn, when they found out he was going to be a liability, they got rid of him very quickly, at least when it became public that he was a liability. It's going to be a little harder with Jared and Ivanka, but what was sort of seemed impossible, it's starting to look possible. I mean, look at Rex Tillerson's State Department snubbing Ivanka Trump and not sending high-level delegation with her to India. So it does seem that the once untouchable Kushners are starting to look a little on shaky ground these days.
Well, and he did, in all fairness, Mr. Kushner spoke to the Washington Post for their article, and he said that he welcomes the change. And apparently he was referring to John Kelly at that moment. He says, quote here, "The order allows this place to function. My #1 priority is a high-functioning White House because I believe in the president's agenda, and I think it should get executed." Kyle, your response to that, and do you believe that Kushner is going to be in the White House for the long haul?
Sure. Well, it seems like that's exactly what a top aide to the president should say. The fact is, no one really wants to go to work. Doesn't matter what job you're in. You don't want to go to work and have all this infighting and politicking to get your voice heard. You'd like an orderly workplace. So I do believe that statement. I have a hard time, given that Donald Trump is so isolated from the establishment, Republicans. He doesn't really have a traditional operation around him, political operation around him. I have a hard time believing that he would depart from that and fire his son-in-law. It seems like that would be some really awkward birthday parties and Thanksgivings at the Trump household if that were to ever happen, because it doesn't seem like Jared and Ivanka are going to go anywhere anytime soon.
All righty. Kelly Jane Torrance and Kyle Felcher, we appreciate both of you being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Thanks.
Sure.